Okay, a couple things to do in order to set up Dynamic3i for emailing is first to start at the global file maintenance, which is where all the internet and server information is kept, and to have specific information from your network administrator. On GB0100, with definition of the company name, etc., there's a button called Internet Information. What you want to do is get the public domain of the server from your network administrator and key that in for the public domain definition, which here as in my example is sdc.on.ca. It will be completely different for your internet setup. The other thing that you want to do is to make sure that your network administrator has a mail server set up, and you need to have the mail server URL for that particular server. And what you want to do is get that URL or the actual IP address, which is entered here as an example, and key that into the mail server URL. Once that's done, email is, as long as it's set up on the mail server, email is ready to go with one other extra definition into Dynamic3i, and I'll show you that, and then a way to test to make sure that the email server is actually up and running before getting into setting up whether invoicing is to be done via email or purchasing is to be done via email, etc. So once these two things are set up, then you want to go directly to the user file, and it's important to know who you're logged on as. Each user is logged in, can be shown as to who's logged in, and what we're going to do is per user they're going to be assigned an employee file, and it's that employee file that the sending email address is going to be sent from with respect to whoever's logged in. So if we quickly look at that, it was logged in as SDC. I'll just call that up again. Whoops. That's program ID. I will just call up the logged in as, and it's SDC. So I will go to the user file maintenance under the global and the system admin and go to the user file. And if we query up SDC, we'll see that SDC is equated or joined with the employee number 201. Now, the employee number 201, if we link directly to that, has an email address attached to it. So this email address is what is known for this employee, and that is now equated to this user SDC, which usually is one and the same, which is why the employee and the user are linked together. Anyways, that is how the email of the particular user gets tied to any email that happens to go on in the system. So a quick check now, once those simple definitions have been set up, is to simply go to GB9810, which is a utility that we have that actually just sends out email from Dynamic3i. Key in anybody's email as you want, and then a simple text. And what should happen when you send this email is, if the network is set up, i.e. the mail server and the IP addresses are all correct, also the services for SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is up and running, this email will be sent out to the recipient. So as a quick check, as soon as I send the email, if I get errors, I know definitely it is a network issue. It is not anything to do with Dynamic3i. It is not anything to do with internal software or definitions. It has to do with a network server and email server, so you want to get in contact with your administrator. If I send this off, I will receive, and I just use myself an example, I have my email open here. I will get my email from the person, as you notice, that's linked to that user that I'm logged in as. So that particular user has their email address from that user file, and that's going to be the reply. And this way I know that email actually went out to the mail server, went out and came over the internet and came to my postal box. So I know that the email is set up correctly and is working. Once we have this definition done, then it simply becomes a definition of in purchasing and with respect to vendors. I want to set up the communication type of the particular vendor. So everything hinges off this particular vendor in the case of purchasing, and the communication type, which I'll just bring up quickly here in the Start right there in purchasing in the communication type, and I'm going to set that vendor up as email. Now this particular email, what happens is as soon as I define this vendor to an email communication type, I deal with the contacts based on that vendor. So now the contacts come up, and I have a particular contact, and I have particular types set up, and you can see how to set these types up. But essentially what happens is for email, a type I would assign maybe to an ordering agent, or a main contact, say for a vendor, and that main contact needs a title, needs a name, etc. in order to go, and that's the email address here that will be sent. So whenever a purchase order is drawn, say for this particular vendor, it will come to this contact type. It'll find out where purchase order, what type is to use, take that particular name and use that particular email address to send the purchase order out from Dynamic3i. Likewise, on the customer master maintenance, exactly the same process. When I look at communicating with my customers for sales orders, for emails, etc., I want to go into my maintenances into the distribution, and look at order processing, into the maintenances, and then into the customer file. And then on the customer contacts, the same setup that we had on the vendor. For customer contacts, I have the ability to set, just we got some customers here, the communication type on the customer file, and this communication type again is the same as the vendors. I print, fax, or electronic, or email. When I email, again, the same function occurs with respect to the customer. The contacts are set up. They have the name, the password, and again, this same type. So depending on the type, an ordering agent would be set up, or a main contact, and that particular type will get and use this email to send out invoices to that purchase order, to that customer, etc. So this is the email address that is linked to that customer. Now the type actually defines, if we go to the types, which are used both in the customer side and the vendor side, the types are set up in the global maintenances, and we will look at contact type maintenance, and the contact types here should become evident for Chief Executive Officer, President. These are user defined that you would set up. So if we just look at say the OE here, what this tells me is that they are an invoice recipient, they are an order acknowledgement recipient, they are, in this case they're not, but they could be selected as a purchase order recipient. So if I use that contact type, that's telling me here that from an email perspective, when I do an invoice run, I'm going to communicate to this contact person. They will, this contact type person, they will receive an email. They will receive an email on the acknowledgement recipient print, because they've been flagged to do so. Likewise, on the as a main contact, they're only going to, so they won't, even though they're set up as email, if I used an SS, they're not going to get any invoices sent down here. So that's why this contact type now kind of turns on and off. That particular contact is going to receive emails or not. So that's in a nutshell how the contact type is used, and remembering the contact type and the email linked to the customer or the particular vendor via the contacts, and then the database administrator setting up the email server URL on the global file maintenance is the key things to setting up emailing ability within Dynamic3i. Again, this network administrator, the public domain, and the mail server URL being the most important things to be set up, and being able to communicate with that just simple email going out the system with GB9810.